Halt! Not a step further. No one is allowed into the city without an entry permit.
Now, this is a game I've been interested in since I first heard it was being developed, thanks to who was making it. You see, back when I was a kid, I saw copies of the Gothic series in my town's video shop and desperately wanted to give them a go, but couldn't until I got my first laptop back in high school. And when I did, they weren't exactly the most accessible of games to just pick up and play. Thankfully, this game is more or less the opposite in that regard. Elex is the latest RPG from Piranha Bytes and published by THQ Nordic for PC, Xbox One, and PS4. And this is a textbook example of one step forward and one step back. In that while it's more accessible by modern standards for someone to just pick up and play without giving up any of the complexity, it also feels like the devs reused the same design document from back when they made their Gothic and Risen games. One of the biggest changes over those games is its setting. Instead of the straightforward fantasy setting Piranha Bytes have used in their other titles, they instead went for a hybrid of fantasy and post-apocalyptic sci-fi. Not only is this a breath of fresh air from an artistic point, but it allowed the devs to experiment with some new ideas that their usual fantasy settings would not allow, like a jetpack which adds extra versatility to exploring the world, and mutant enemies that look right out of a Cronenberg movie. But a setting needs the right story to go along with it, and in that department, Elex's story is serviceable at best. We play as Jax, a former commander in one of the four societies that make up the world of Magalan, the Albs, whom after being betrayed by his brother finds himself stranded in the wilderness and going through withdrawal from a lack of, well, Elex. From there, you're on a quest to ally with one of the three other factions in Magalan, learn new skills to replace the ones you can't use anymore, and find out why your brother betrayed you along with what's behind the political rumblings in the Alb nation of Zakor.
Believe me, I don't like the thought of killing Albs who have not had the chance to think about the truth. But the truths in Eden are not only...
While this is rather straightforward narrative-wise, the story is easily covered up by various side quests and by being made up of quest lines that are very open-ended. So, like in Dragon's Dogma, you won't really know which exact quest is going to move the story forward or expand on it. Though unlike Dragon's Dogma, you can at least tell which quests are dedicated to the main story and which aren't. Just a shame the story isn't exactly well articulated in some areas. Case in point, its theme of drug addiction and withdrawal. It just utterly fumbles them by giving them no real presence. See, a side effect of taking Elex to enhance yourself is complete loss of emotion, and since Jax has been taking it all of his life, up until the events of the game, he's supposed to be experiencing emotions for the first time ever. And yet, he constantly reacts to everything with the same deadpan monotone throughout. And it's not a different monotone, since there are flashback scenes where his manner of speaking then is exactly the same as it is now. This isn't so much a problem with the writing in of itself, but just more of an issue of the voice acting, and highlights just how important the right voice actor can be since they can really make or break the narrative aspects of a character.
When did you last see Ascor?
Just over 3 months ago, not long before I came out here.
You must be good with a sword to have got posted out here.
The gameplay itself works as intended, but like the story, there are bugbears that do bring down what otherwise are solid mechanics. Combat primarily is a simple hack and slash setup with light attacks, heavy attacks that can be chained together into combos, and are of course fueled by a stamina pool to encourage strategic thinking from the player, with the occasional flurry attack thrown in as you build up to it. But where it screws up is with this weird slow-mo feature, and a lack of enemy telegraphs. The idea with the slow-mo episodes is that you're supposed to use the extra time when these happen to utilize a dodge or to try to use a different attack, but because these go off seemingly at random, you never think to try anything like I just mentioned, and often just end up showcasing how an enemy is going to hit you before you can hit them. And when they first happen, you'll be more confused as to what the hell just happened. With the enemies telegraphing their attacks, the issue is that they'll telegraph when they're getting ready to fight you, but in the fights, they seemingly never telegraph when they're actually about to strike, which will throw off your rhythm in the middle of a scuffle. Then there's the issue of enemy lock-on. When you're in combat, you automatically lock onto the nearest enemy, and while this isn't a bad idea in of itself, especially if you're facing off against one, it does mean that if you go up against a group, you will find yourself getting blindsided by an enemy you couldn't see coming, and end up hitting the game over screen more times than you can count. You can toggle what enemy the lock-on targets, but this is assigned to Z and C keys on the PC version, which just makes doing so really awkward. Thankfully, they can be reassigned in the options menu, and I would recommend rebinding them to something more comfortable before jumping into the game. But there is more to the combat than just melee. You also have access to magical abilities, and in a first for Piranha Bytes, third-person shooting. I've only had to go at the disposable alb spells, which can be found by exploring, and from that I can say the use of magic works fine. It is a little disappointing that from what I've seen, you don't have much in the way of knowing where certain spells are going to go off, or that you can't create custom spells, but they do add a decent tactical layer to the combat and can really help you out in a pinch. The shooting, on the other hand, while not anything special, works as it would in almost any standard third-person shooter, though switching between range to melee can be rather cumbersome, especially in the heat of a moment. But it is forgivable, and something you would have to take into consideration when facing against the enemies. Which reminds me of something I do rather like about Elex. The fact that it's not afraid to demand a commitment from the player. You see, Elex is a rather hard game, not in the same way Dark Souls is challenging or how early NES games were, but in that in order to make progress in it, you need to invest time into improving the main character. Right from the get-go, exploration and siding with the faction are heavily encouraged, so not only can you complete more quests to level up quicker, and in turn improve Jax, but so you can also access unique faction gear and abilities. And trust me, you need to do these, since early in the game you're given quests that will demand you trek to the other side of the world and take you into territories full of enemies beyond your current level. This will definitely put some players off playing the game, but if you stick with it, you will have the pleasant role-playing experience of revisiting enemies that once dominated you and making them your bitch. Plus, as mentioned before, you have access to not only a jetpack, which acts like the horse in Skyrim when it comes to exploring, but various companions who can help you out in combat. And they are pretty well equipped to handle what the game world throws at them, and their AI is competent across the board, but unfortunately they can't be customized and the game doesn't tell you any of their stats. So you gotta be mindful of the very real possibility of them getting knocked out in a fight, or that the game doesn't indicate if they level up with you, if at all. As for the faction aspect, it is a holdover from the devs' earlier titles that does still hold up, as choosing one of the three factions will have an impact on things like what gear you can acquire, what skills you can learn, and even the flow of the story. Plus, they are unique and wholly distinct from each other in both abilities and aesthetics, with the Berserkers bringing the classical high fantasy and magic we've come to expect from Piranha Bytes, to the Outlaws who add Mad Max and hard drug use to the mix, and the religious clerics who bring some hard sci-fi technology to the table. Regardless of which one you choose, you will get some abilities that will give you an edge. However, there are some neutral skill trainers who aren't exclusive to factions, but both of these work in a manner that's realistic and tied to how demanding the game can be.
Get me a drink and something to eat.
In order to unlock new skills or improve them, you need to visit a trainer who'll train you in exchange for a price, which includes not only money from your inventory, but skill points you gain by leveling up. I won't deny that it can be somewhat tedious having to always go back to the same couple people just to improve what Jax can do. When other games employ systems like skill books and skill leveling, there is still a hardcore charm to it as well, because what seems more believable? That a mighty hero learned how to better wield a sword through the use of a trainer, or that he learned how to throw fireballs from his hands by killing orcs with a battle axe. Despite this charm, the skill system would be better if there was, at the very least, a limited skill leveling system alongside the current one, which would make improving Jax a more pleasant experience in the early hours of the game. Visually as well, the game does look pretty nice, though there are some times where the texture work does look a little iffy, and some pieces of decoration in the environment do look out of place. And the less said about lighting, especially in the interior areas, the better. And the game is rather technically sound as well, though I did experience some glitches here and there. They weren't necessarily game-breaking, and they were just a literal once-in-a-lifetime experience out of all the time I spent playing this. So at the very least, you can expect Elex to be a technically sound product. When it's all said and done, Elex is a very flawed yet deeply sincere hardcore role-playing experience. It has the most to offer people who love the likes of The Witcher 3, Dark Souls, and of course Piranha Bytes, Gothic, and Risen games. But even then, if you're a fan of these, there's no guarantee you'll love Elex, thanks heavily to how awkward and clunky combat and presentation can be. But if you're a general RPG fan, then at the very least, it is worth a look if you're curious, and a purchase when it goes on sale.
The Duke is irrelevant. All must bow to the hybrid, or die.
You don't want to do this.
The hybrid's will shall be served.
thanks for checking out this review, I really do appreciate it, and if you really like the video, then don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe, and for further updates on upcoming videos, as well as stuff that I'm unfortunately behind on, feel free to check out my Minds blog and Gab accounts. Anyway, up next, I'm gonna have a review of Kingdom Come Deliverance, but that is gonna be pretty late, later on in March, because, well, I'm going on holiday next week. So, yeah, I'm gonna be behind on some videos, and in the meantime, enjoying my time up in Queensland for my birthday, revisiting a dear old friend. Either way, I will have some more videos out soon, but they will be a little late. But as always, stick around.